that's just everything we're striving for since the Georgia game last year is for that national championship. So it would just mean a lot for all the hard work that's been put in, that it's paid off. But ultimately, it's for the pride of the school for sure.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was J.J. McCarthy on the Rich Eisen Show. Played some of that audio yesterday, and we're playing it again today. Can't get enough of J.J. McCarthy. I'm asking you, can you get enough of J.J. McCarthy? I don't think so. I don't think so if you're a Michigan fan. J.J. McCarthy is put together a magical season, and it continues. As you know, as Michigan gets ready for their game coming up this Saturday in the college football semifinal against TCU, something we're going to be talking about today. Got a lot of numbers and things to throw your way. As always, if you are out there and you're listening or watching this live and you want to get a question in, you want to get a point in, well, we put those questions and points up on the screen. We consider them, we talk about them, and we work through the show. You're a big part of it. Let's say you're the biggest part of it, the Michigan people here on the Maize and Blue Review. And we are, if you're just stopping by or finding this after the fact, we're here live weekdays at 1 o'clock talking about the latest in Michigan sports. It's been a lot of Michigan. I was talking to a Michigan fan, a friend of mine who's been a lifelong Michigan fan. I hadn't talked to him, but I did talk to him today, and I asked him, how is it going? He said, it's going great. I'm like, oh, family and everything else. He's like, yeah, they're fine. No, it's going great. Being a Michigan fan, he's telling me how he's just on cloud nine. I said, well, has it been a little bit, you biting your nails in anticipation of New Year's Eve? He said, yes and no. He's like, I'm ready. He was ready to, see the game the next day after the Big Ten title game, or the next day after Ohio State. But he's also, the no part is that he's just relishing every minute, because it's just like, and he separated it. He did say, he's like, this has been the best 2 years of my life. And I'm like, well, what about your kid graduating? He's like, oh yeah. That's sure. He got married and a couple of years ago, and he's a long time ago, actually. He said, but he was saying he separates it. But everything that he was saying is like, this has been the greatest 2 years of my life. This has been the greatest week of my life. And he said Saturday, and I could feel that. I think there are a lot of people that feel the same way. They're ready for the game, but at the same time, it's been great. It's been a great ride. And one of the great parts about this ride is that I think all of us, every single person that's watching this, listening to this, watching and listening, thinks that this is going to continue, that it's going to go into 2023, all the way to the 9th of January, where something extremely special and rare could happen. That's what the anticipation and it's all about. We're going to talk about some of those things. I've got numbers, a lot of numbers to throw at you. Rematch numbers. You may have heard me a couple of weeks ago after Michigan beat Ohio State. We were talking about, even before you saw Ohio State, the chance they could get backdoor like they did into the college football playoff. And immediately there were these numbers that were thrown out, like, once you beat a team one time in college football, it's more difficult to beat them a second time. Well, I looked at some of those numbers. We'll dive into that. I get the latest from the Fiesta Bowl. Michigan, they're in Arizona. They were taking pictures. I watched them deplane. I watched them high five the mascot, get on the bus and everything else, and say their first words, for the Fiesta Bowl in Arizona. I'll tell you what I thought of all of that. And we'll also hear from J.J. McCarthy. Now, you just heard from J.J. there at the beginning, talking about a championship. And I played J.J. McCarthy yesterday. And then there was, in that interview with Rich Eisen, he talked for about a minute 15. They asked him about the smiley face on his hand. And instead of putting the audio and just playing the audio for you, I just thought I'd play the audio and the video for you. We'll have that coming up as well. And you may have already heard the story, or you may have known it before. I didn't before about why he puts the smiley face on his hand, but it's a great story. And I think, if you like Michigan, you already know the story. You like JJ McCarthy. I don't think you're going to mind another minute of him explaining it and then people responding to it on here. But I'm going to start. I asked this question about polling for Ohio State on Saturday. And it sounds like a weird thing because it is. I mean, and I've been down this road a lot before. And we go down this road. And then you ask fans, it seems like it happens more in basketball because you're in a situation where, you're trying to get into the tournament and then you need this team to beat this team. And then sometimes you have to, root for your rival. And then you say, would you ever beat for Michigan? Would you ever root for Michigan State? Would you ever root for Ohio State? And the immediate reaction is no. No, you'd never root for Ohio State in a million years. I mean, no. And then you get into the category is like you'll say it. I'll go back and there was an example in the first game this year. Ohio State was playing Notre Dame. And you knew if we were just talking right here like we are right now, and we were saying, look, is it better for the Big Ten? Is it better for Michigan to have Ohio State win that game? Well, it is. It was better for Michigan to beat a top ranked, and they were undefeated, beating a top ranked Ohio State team. It was better for the profile overall of the Big Ten. And, you want your conference to be known as a tough conference, even though the Big Ten wasn't known as, it wasn't a locked and loaded Big Ten this year, but you want those things. And yet, all of that. And then you go into the game and you're not rooting for Ohio State. Nobody was, even though if you know that it's better. But this time around, we'll put a couple for instances. Let's say, for instance, Michigan wins on Saturday. I'm expecting Michigan to win on Saturday. And then, what's the game start at 4? So, we're going to be, 6:30, 7 o'clock. It's going to be over. And then, you get the countdown to New Year's, but then you get the other semifinal. It's Georgia and it's Ohio State. And you say, well, you want Michigan to play Georgia? You want Michigan to play Ohio State? You're at least going to have those, that the game's going to be there. And maybe you'll just sit there and fold your arms and say, whatever's going to happen, let it go. Bring it on. And maybe, that's I like that approach. It's a very reasonable approach. It's probably the approach that, most people need to take. But let me look, and we put these numbers up a couple of weeks ago, and they've changed slightly. So I'm going to put the numbers up on the board again. This is why you might poll for, not root, but you might poll for Ohio State. FanDuel has their odds for the championship game if Michigan beats TCU. And if Michigan plays Ohio State, FanDuel has Ohio State as a 3.5 point favorite. Now, that doesn't mean Michigan is 3.5 points worse or Ohio State's 3.5. We understand how gambling lines work. They're trying to get money on equal sides and all of that. We know Michigan just, pulverized Ohio State in Columbus, 45-23. We know they've beaten them 2 years in a row, but 3.5. And if the game was against Georgia, Michigan, Georgia, it would be a lot bigger number. Actually, a 5 point bigger number, 8.5. Is that enough for you? I ask you to poll and not root for Ohio State. Now let's see what the people have to say about this. I kind of gave you my answer, and it took a long time to get there. And Otis is he's ready for the game. Come on, man. He's, I think, putting out the charge for McCarthy for president. He gets my vote. I'll vote for JJ McCarthy for president. I've been getting the audio for JJ McCarthy, and then I've also, looked at the video. And JJ McCarthy, I used to have hair, but it never looked like JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy has his hair that's like flying off of his head. And it never occurred to me before, and I'll say it again before we watch the video of him explaining the smiley face in his hand. JJ McCarthy's hair kind of looks like a winged helmet, like on his head. Like if you had a hair winged helmet and you put it on the top of his head, that's just something that I was thinking about as I was looking at it today. Now, there was back in the day, Michigan had a basketball. I think he was probably Michigan's best dunker of all time. Air Georgia. His name was Brett Petway. And so maybe an obscure player to you, everything, but he was a great dunker. And Petway shaved the maize and blue into his head. It was close cropped. And it looked pretty good. Nowadays, that was before guys are like dyeing their hair now. Like somebody needs to line that thing up with the winged helmet and then dye it. Now we'll be on to something there. We'll set that back up. We'll show the McCarthy video. Antoine says, I appreciate the honesty here from Antoine right off the bat. A part of me is pulling for Ohio State for the Big Ten's sake and to stop the SEC. It's the best narrative. Other side of me, I don't want them to win because if we lose to them, I don't want to hear Ohio State crap. Yeah, that is the part of it, that you don't really want to consider, but I didn't consider that part, at least today I didn't, Antoine, and it's a good thing. Like, it's been SEC, everything, that's football. And if you would have, like, remember when it was Georgia and Alabama, everybody's like, there's going to be a SEC, love fest party. And it was. I mean, it ended up being a great game and everything else. That was the Tua game, right? Where he came in, Jalen Hurts, Tua, overtime, all of that. It was a great game. But yeah, so then it would be a Big Ten love fest and the greatest rivalry of all time, part 2. Oh yeah, that's a good one, Antoine. But no, yeah, you have to win. If Michigan, that's a caveat I'll put on there. Michigan has to win this, you say regardless. But if they do get Ohio State, they have to beat Ohio State, because if Michigan beats TCU and they play Georgia and they play a hell of a game and they end up, doing what we all don't want to consider, you'd say, okay, Georgia, hey, they're a great champion, whatever else, ready for next year. But if Michigan drew Ohio State and then they played Ohio State and it went wrong, that's going to leave a more sour taste in your mouth. Good point, Antoine. That's one that I'm going to have to think about as I sit here now, that if I really would want to pull for Ohio State. Ooh, wow, man. Otis is indicating he doesn't care who Michigan plays in the championship, just as long as Michigan is there. Okay. I get that. And that is both honest and understandable. But when you look at the numbers, the raw numbers, Michigan's they've got a better chance, at least statistically, numbers wise, at least that's the how the Vegas numbers look at it. You know what I want? You know what I'm saying? I should say. Otis indicating that he wishes Georgia and Ohio State could both lose that game. There's a part about it, this game, the junior varsity game on Saturday, Georgia and Ohio State, where what I really want to see is both of those teams look very beatable, so you just feel better about January 9th. Michigan gets the victory, you celebrate, you just sit down and watch that game. And then you see what Ohio State had a really hard time stopping Michigan's explosive plays. Let's say Ohio State really contains Georgia's offense, and you feel like, wow, if Ohio State's able to contain Georgia's offense, then what's Michigan going to be? Meanwhile, maybe Georgia, so you have to be probably a low-scoring, ugly affair, sloppily played, where they look very beatable. That's I think what you want, because one of them has to come through, right? You can't play TCU twice. You know that. AJ says if Ohio State does go and win against them, Michigan gets the forever talk stuff card. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would really be something, AJ. Michigan You thought you were on cloud nine beating Ohio State last year. And that was only supplanted by Michigan beating Ohio State again this year and on the road and back to back. And then not having to wait another year, only to wait a couple weeks and do it again, but to win a national championship. Like, what are we talking about, folks? I mean, at least say stop the presses and just think about sometimes this is stuff that you dream about. But if it plays out, and we are so close to it playing out, AJ, if it plays out where Michigan beats TCU and Ohio State beats Georgia, and then Michigan tops Ohio State again, Michigan will not be able to be contained. The state of Michigan, every Michigan fan, they say, imagine if Michigan beat Ohio State for the national championship. I don't know. It would be. I'm imagining it. I'm just sitting here imagining it, and it would be as football ecstasy. It would be the greatest. It would be the greatest thing ever. That's what it would be. There it is. It would be the greatest thing ever. So it'll be great as well. Either way, it's going to be great. But, beating Ohio State twice. Wow. Otis calls it ginormous, beating Ohio State twice. Yeah, I'm there. Steven just wants to win. He's not getting in the hypothetical. He's not going down that road. Richard watched the presser. Harbaugh and Dono. They sounded focused and grounded. They did, and it'll be a little tease, and I'll just comment it because really, Harbaugh gets off the plane, and he's like, we're I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it right in front of me. We are happy to touchdown in Arizona, get it, touchdown, and we're just let it rip and get on with it, man. He sounds like he's having fun, confident, and excited. Otis is thinking that TCU is going to be Michigan's biggest challenge. I don't think so, but hey, you could be right, Otis. You're a football fan. You know your football. It would be a brutal lead up to a U of M OSU natty. Brutal anticipation and brutal hypotheticals. Yes. I'm going to go ahead and recommend this, and maybe it'll be a good time to take about 30 seconds every day leading up to Saturday and say, when Michigan wins on Saturday, regardless of who they play on January the 9th, don't consider the possibility of them ending up on the wrong side of a score in the national championship game. Just you've got to this point right here. The category that you should be in is supremely confident about Michigan taking on TCU. And if they do punch their ticket to the national championship game, just take that confidence and roll with it for the next 9 days. Do not consider any other outcome but victory in the national championship game. How about that? Account 22. So there's going to be no brutal. When you see anybody suggesting anything where, you're going to say that would go down the road of being brutal, just say, we're not considering any outcome except a championship. So, you'll deal with that. As the saying goes, there's a saying, you'll cross that road when you get to it. Well, if you need to cross it, then you will, but don't consider that road. Consider smooth sailing in a paved road to a national championship game. Okay, there's some other numbers to look at. And I told you that immediately when you saw Ohio State back into the playoff, that there was the notion that Michigan wouldn't want to play Ohio State because the team that loses in the regular season has a record of 16-7 in postseason bowl games. And that is true. You can look that up. When you look at rematches in college football, a team that loses in the regular season comes back and wins 70% of the time in postseason bowl games. Now, that's a pretty big clip. And, you go back, you have, what last year? Georgia lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, and then they came back in the bowl game and beat them. However, those are bowl games. You would think that they would just look at all of the numbers, because if it's in a conference championship game and it's a rematch, the winner is 35-24, which is a substantial, as substantial as the team that loses one. This one comes back and is on the other way. Plus, there's many more of them to look for in history. So if we're looking at sample size, so I just added them both together, and that gives us the largest sample size of a team playing twice in the same year. And you can look at it. What's that? 82 times. If teams have played, and I don't know, they may not have used Utah, USC, that would just bump it up even more. I think actually I did include that in my, I'd have to look back. I'd have to look at my notes, but I believe I did use Utah beating USC. But here's the number. In college football history, teams have played twice in the same season, 82 times. The winner of that first game wins again 63% of the time. So Michigan, Ohio State. You want Michigan to play Ohio State again. I think it will be an easier game, an easier one to win. Is it easier? They'll have a better chance. They've got a chance against Georgia. They'll have a better chance against Ohio State. The numbers point to that. And plus, we watched the game. We watched Michigan go down to Columbus, and we watch how they handled them. And now you're talking about it on a neutral field. I'm pretty confident that Michigan can beat Ohio State again. That's how I look at it. Count 22 thinks TCU is in trouble. Let's get to Andres, who's talking about the rust factor. Rust. He says he doubts Michigan will be rusty. TCU runs that risk more. Think they were riding the wave of everyone loving their hot streak, and now they've had a month to sit on that L. Okay, now we're talking about intangibles and a rust factor. Well, if Michigan, if Michigan did not play in their conference championship game, and then TCU did play in the Big 12 championship game like they did and played Kansas State, Michigan would have had a week extra off. And I think at that point, talking about the rust factor, you could say, well, TCU played more recently. Michigan has had an extra week off. Rust factor. And then I'm going to consider it at that point. If both teams, they played on the same day. If Michigan played the nightcap, so, it was the same day. I'm not going to get into, well, Michigan played more recently. It was the same day. They both had equal amount of time off. Now, Ohio State, they may have the rust factor. I'll buy that, because Georgia did play in the SEC championship game. Ohio State's had longer time out. So I'll give, if I was looking at that game, I would talk about a little bit of a rust factor against Ohio State. Now, the intangible factor of going for an undefeated season and then TCU having that snatched away from them. I think that if there's anything, I wouldn't have wanted Michigan to lose in the Big Ten for everything in the Big Ten title game, for everything that they got for it. They got another championship, a Big Ten championship. That's worth, its weight in gold. They still would have got into the college football championship. But I do think there is something about having it, and both TCU and Ohio State are in this situation of having it taken away. And in Ohio State's case, getting embarrassed and having to wait it out and having to have another team do their dirty work and rely on them where they don't control their own destiny and then get a new hope, a new chance. That I think mentally, I don't. If it is it an advantage against Georgia, or is it going to be an advantage? It is a motivation. I think it helps. You know, is it something that I'm looking at saying, "Oh yeah, now Ohio State is that going to be the thing that I point to that they had it taken away from them, and now they get in there and I'm picking them to win it all." I'm not, but I do think that is a motivational factor. It's the same thing with TCU because you have this magical ride, undefeated. Oh, I guess it's going to be the greatest season ever. And then you watch that game, they were right down there in overtime, running the ball. Like, what did they end up from being undefeated? 3 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches. And then I saw Max Duggan after the game. I mean, he was inconsolable. That's part of why, you watched him play and you saw him lay his heart on the line and everything. And you're like, I like that kid. I think that's what everybody said. Boy, he just it was hard not to like him, and then you see him afterwards. He's, so I don't care. I just wanted to win the Big 12, but that'll be motivation for them as well. Okay. Here's a couple trends that I want people to think about that I'm going to get to straight ahead. But first, I want to tell you that, Christmas was on Sunday, but we're still in the holiday season. You still, friend Christmas. You go and maybe have your family Christmas, and you're that's still happening. Yesterday we had a Secret Santa. And, for my sister-in-law, it would have been a very nice gift for her. I don't even know if I think she does like Michigan. The whole family does. Giving her the Secret Santa gift of the Maize and Blue Review, where she can know everything about Michigan recruiting, everything known about what's going on up to the minute out there in Arizona. Give that gift of the Maize and Blue Review. What a great Secret Santa gift it would make for the Michigan fan in your life. Go to michigan.rivals.com and you'll be a Secret Santa, but then you will win the Secret Santa party. Okay, some Fiesta Bowl thoughts. Let's look at Andres talked about Russ. Before I get to my some of my thoughts here about the game on this Tuesday, the 27th, OJ asked the question, OJ Jr., would Michigan overlook playing Ohio State versus being more hungry playing Georgia? Yeah, I think once you get, I get the Russ, I get all of these questions. You overlook somebody like in a regular season if you're playing a tough team, and then you have, in 2 weeks you're playing a tough team, and sandwiched in between that, you have one of these games that you could overlook. That does happen. In this scenario, if Michigan plays Ohio State, it's going to be for everything in the world, in the universe. And there would be no overlooking anything there. There would be no, where are you going to overlook? Would you think that they would be overconfident? Would Michigan be overconfident against Ohio State? Remember, that's Jim Harbaugh over there on the sideline, who had to go year in and year out as a head coach and lose against the Scarlet and Gray, so much so that almost everyone was ready to show him the door, even though they liked him as a head coach. It was too much to take. And then he had the great story of being able to turn it around and win the last two. Jim Harbaugh is not going to take Ohio State for granted. He's not going to let his players take Ohio State for granted. Not with it being Ohio State, not with it being, for a championship. No, I'm not. I don't see it, OJ Jr. That's not it. I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen. Account 22 wants the Buckeyes to get crushed. Steven's asking a question. Thoughts on Corum potentially coming back? Well, Blake Corum is Michigan's MVP. He was voted at the banquet as Michigan's MVP. And if I had my own vote, I would have voted Blake Corum as Michigan's MVP. Now, you can make a case, and Antoine actually has made the case in the last week or two that Michigan was forced to open it up because they didn't have their MVP. And there may be some truth to that. But, after going back and examining the game, it's not like Donovan Edwards was really, running the ball well until the second half when, he went out there. He had a couple nice runs in the second half until he had the big 75 and 85 yarders. It wasn't like, Michigan was having any success on the ground. Now, do you want to make the case that they were forced to open it up throwing the ball? You could say that. And yet, Michigan was they were hanging in there, and it felt like to me that a seal was broken when McCarthy found that 69-yarder to Kojo over on the sideline. And then the confidence that they all were feeling after pressing for so long in this passing game, they were all very capable when lightning struck twice when he hit Kojo for the 75-yarder. It was like the sky opened up. Wow. It was a confidence in the passing game. I think buoyed by the return, if Blake Corum could come in and be anything like he was, I think that's only a positive for Michigan. I don't think that that's going to hold back their passing game or curtail anything else like the touches that Edwards was going to have. No, I think it would be like the Penn State game where you remember Donovan Edwards ripped off a 67-yard touchdown. And then the next series, they gave it to a Corum, and he ripped off a 61-yard touchdown. I think that's how it would be. I don't know if there would be 60-yard plus touchdowns, but I still think that it's I would put it in the doubtful. I did put on a percentage a while back, and I don't remember what that percentage was, but if I had to think about it right now, what's the percentage if I would guess that Blake Corum could come back and play? I would put it at 25%, and then it would be lower than saying that how effective he was going to be. So there's a chance, but it's not a great chance. And then it's even less than that he would be his old self. But I'm not, taking it off the table or anything like that. It could happen. All right, here's some things to think about with this game, the Fiesta Bowl. And when I am asked, and there is a little bit of paralysis by analysis because we've known this matchup for so long, but it's like in the offseason when you have a team that is, not a walkthrough, to start your non-conference up, like you have a legitimate, what you think is a top 10 matchup or a blue blood or something like that. In this case, this is it's kind of like that. We've been able to focus on TCU where we've been watching film. We've been looking, chewing all the numbers out, just chewing on all the numbers. I don't know, chewing all the numbers out. We've been going over it. Here's what I would say. If you say, hey, what do I think about the Fiesta Bowl? Well, I think you've got two really good offenses. And that's reflected with the over and under of this game of 58.5. These are two top 5, top 6 offenses in the country. Max Duggan is an outstanding quarterback. He can run the ball. He is a dual threat. And he is tough. And he hangs in there. And I see him when, he watching this tape. The thing I like a lot about him is that he stands in the pocket and he's not looking around at the rush. He will keep his head up on his receiver and he will deliver that ball and he will take the punishment. Not all quarterbacks do that. He will. It's also like when he runs the ball. Yeah, he runs it. He's not looking to slide. Max Duggan's looking to take his shoulder and deliver some punishment. He reminds me a little bit of Jalen Hurts, the former Alabama and Oklahoma quarterback, the current Philadelphia Eagles QB. He's excellent. That's why he won the Davey O'Brien Award. And yet J.J. McCarthy is right there. And, I wouldn't trade J.J. McCarthy for Max Duggan. So we all know how we feel about J.J. McCarthy. He's right there. He can do all those things as well. So Duggan's running concerns me, and the ability of the receivers. They don't have one or two, and Quentin Johnson is 6'4", could be the first receiver taken in the draft next year. He had 4 catches for 139 against K-State. And his specialty is going up, snagging the ball, high pointing it, and over whoever's on him. That is a concern. The jump balls. Those are the 2 biggest things for me if I'm looking at it from a Michigan defensive standpoint. Duggan running, and the jump balls to QJ. Meanwhile, I think Michigan has the advantage with their running game. And the 2 that I would point to, the aforementioned quarterback J.J. McCarthy and the one-arm bandit, Donovan Edwards. That's why I think Michigan is going to win this game. And I think Michigan is going to get to 40 points, damn near close to 40 points, their season average. That's what I think they're going to be able to do on offense. So that is how I see it. Speaking of J.J. McCarthy, I want you to watch this 1 minute, 15 seconds of McCarthy. He was asked by Rich Eisen about the smiley face. You watch Michigan play, you'll see the smiley face on his hand, and he was asked about that. And here's what he
My
had.
sophomore year in high school, and it was the first game that I lost. And it was a brutal game, not going to lie, just nothing was going our way. And I was pretty pissed off throughout the whole game. And I was signing autographs at the end for a lot of the kids. And this little girl, I was signing her newspaper, and she said, "Why'd you look so mad out there? Like, it didn't look like you were having any fun." And it was like one of those conversations didn't feel real because it was really profound, like conversation for this young girl. And she was just like, "You need to smile more. Like, you need to have fun." And she kept saying that, and she drew a smiley face on my hand after I gave her the Sharpie back. And from then on, like, I was like, you know what? It's really that simple. Like, you perform your best when you're having fun. When you're stressed and you're kind of resisting your own inner world, then things are just going to be out of whack and not aligned with your performance and your optimal play. And from then on, I just kept a smiley face on my hand. We went undefeated, won the state championship that year. And I was just like, you know what? This is a really, subtle, small gesture that will be very profound later in life, just being able to spread positivity in any way I can.
And sometimes you have to look down at your hand and remind yourself.
There you go. Thanks to the Rich Eisen show. And I said it earlier, I just want you to take a look at the hair on McCarthy. And it reminds me of a gigantic winged helmet. Just look at it one more time. Look at that. Am I crazy there? Or am I just thinking all Michigan? Or is there a little bit to that? You can put the full screen out there, see if you can see it. I think you can see it anyways, but I'll just put it back over there for one more second. Come on. No? You got the wing here and the wing over there and maybe another wing there and another one there. That's where I'm at with it. That's what I'm thinking. The winged helmet. Now, if you had already seen that, you'd be like, yeah, that's a great story. And if you hadn't, well, then you're like, first time you've heard of the great story. Good job from J.J. McCarthy. All right, I've got 2 things for you trend-wise that I'm thinking about when it comes to Michigan. I'm going to get to that coming up straight ahead. Good to see Jason in here on this Tuesday. He says, I want OSU to win every game unless they play us. Now that we're in their heads, I want OSU in the championship game for sure. There you go. Jason is not beating around the bush. He's ready for the Buckeyes. Kenneth. Georgia needs to get that get back. LOL. Even talking about next season. He says this would be sweet here. Michigan jump pass against TCU or wait to the national championship game. I think that was a once in a lifetime play. I don't think Michigan's going to be breaking any I know Tebow did it a lot, and when he was with Florida down under the goal line, but I don't think that I would bet against Michigan ever doing it again. I wouldn't want them to ever do it again, but I don't think they're going to do it against Ohio State again. It would be interesting to, if you somehow could fake it and then, I don't know. I don't think so. Jesse, I dislike OSU more than I dislike the SEC bias. So screw OSU. I understand where you're coming from, Jesse. Let's see if the coach is back in here. Star this one up, Dennis. We're going back to the championship game, and we will be the favorites. Not only there won't be many quarterbacks in our way to stop us. Go blue, strong, muscle man, shades, thumbs up. Yes, I said it. Very nice. Start it. Start it again. Get the mic position just right. Oh, wait. I did start. Now I got to hit screen save. Let's try it again. Let's try the other side. All right. We'll see how that ends up looking. Supposed to be some year-ender stuff that I was going to do there. A couple more, and then I'll get to these trends that I want you guys to check out for sure. Brian says, got to beat the best to be the best. Bring on Georgia. I expect Georgia to crush Ohio State. I think Georgia's going to win too. I'm just saying that it will be Michigan will have the better opportunity to win. It doesn't mean they can't beat Georgia. I just think they'll have a better opportunity to do it. OJ Jr. again. Just hope Ohio State versus Georgia game is close either way. There you go. So we've got it. I know where you're at. Now, the trends, sometimes you see the trends, you say, well, anything can happen. True. And there's no doubt about that. Anything can happen. That's why we watch. Just because the way things have gone all year long doesn't mean that's how it's going to go coming up on Saturday. Meanwhile, here are two things that I'm expecting to happen. And one is that I expect that Michigan will score a touchdown on its first drive of the game on Saturday. If you go back and look when J.J. McCarthy has started this year for Michigan, and that started with the second game this year against Hawaii, Michigan scored touchdowns on 75% of its first drives this year with McCarthy as quarterback. I think that that's a pretty good chance. I like 75%. I think Michigan will score a touchdown on their first drive Saturday against TCU. Meanwhile, Michigan has played close games. If you look at just their Big Ten games this year, they played 10 of them. You include the Big Ten title game against Purdue. In 8 out of 10 of those games, 80% of the time, there were one-score games at the half. Michigan trailed Ohio State 20-17. They trailed Rutgers 17-14. They were ahead in most of the other games when you think about Maryland 17-13. Indiana, they were tied at 10. They're up by 2 against Penn State 16-14. The game against MSU was 13-7. And the game against Illinois was 7-3. 8 out of the 10 games. So the only 2 that were not, you got to go to Iowa. That game was a 13-0 game at the half with Michigan up, and they were up 17-3. Michigan was on Nebraska. All of their other games in the Big Ten this year, one-score games at the half. So if I'm telling you, I think it's going to be close at the half against TCU, 80% of their games this year in the Big Ten were like that. I expect it to be a close game at the half. I also expect Michigan to come out and dominate in the second half with their adjustments, and not just offensively, but defensively. I added all of this up and checked it out twice today. And Michigan is nasty in a good way, naughty and nice in the second half on offense and defense. Michigan's outscored their Big Ten opponents this year 197-57 in the second half. Those are the 2 trends I expect to continue. I think Michigan will have a touchdown on their first drive, and I think it will be a close game at the half, and then I think they will dominate in the second half. They've been doing it all year long, and I expect that to continue coming up on Saturday against TCU. That's where I'm at. Those are the numbers. That's what I'm thinking about and how it's going to play out. So I'll take a couple more on the feedback here. Count 22 is talking about brutal. If it's Michigan, Ohio State, he's talking about the bickering between fan bases. Yeah, I get that. I know, I get that. People love, the trolls, the trolls and the freaks. The freaks come out at night. The trolls are out all day and all night. Eddie asking a question. Imagine if they lost to Ohio, it would be devastating. That game was already played. Bring on Georgia. Like I said, I'm not trying to imagine any of that. I'm keeping the I do it for a second, even though I said just for a second. Just for that one last second. All right. Those are the numbers that I'm looking to. People talking a little bit about, I'm with Mark here. Like the stream. I don't ask people to, once in a while, I say, hey, rate. If you're listening on the podcast, go down and leave a comment and rate it, because that gets the podcast pushed up into when people type in Michigan football podcast. The more comments and the more remarks that are left there, it boosts it up. I haven't tried anything like superficial. I just ask once in a while. I should ask every day. Bam, 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 bam. Also, likes and comments, I think, help push it up as well when it comes to YouTube. All of those things, they help. So if you do, and thanks, Mark, for helping me out and reminding me about all of that. Mark indicating that Jake Moody said this year it's a business trip. I didn't hear Jake Moody say that, but I'm glad that Jake Moody said that. Last year, kind of sightseeing and, hey, this is great to be in the college football playoff. It feels like, I agree with Jake and Mark and anybody else, if anybody is breaking down this game and they say, I think Michigan was just happy to be there last year, they may say that they don't agree with that, but I felt that way. It was so long since they had beat Ohio State. When they beat Ohio State last year in the snow at home, it's such a relief. And then they were able to validate it a week later. And, to account 22's point about, the trolls and everybody, and if I had to look at one more tweet about, Michigan not knowing their way to Indianapolis and blah, 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 but, and it was just like, oh my God. And then Michigan found their way to Indianapolis and they won the game, which was so important. So it was just a feeling of relief and happy to be in the college football playoff. This year, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like Saturday feels like business for them. I feel like so much business for me. And I feel like I'm looking forward to January 9th and the game and all of that. So that's how I'm sitting with it all. I do want to I'm going to read some more feedback here, and let's get to it. Mark, indicating that Blake Corum said that he was 50-50. That's about coming back next year. Those are things that we can talk about in the future. Andres, if Ohio State would have played like they did in 22, like they did in 21, the Don would have gashed them for chunks like Haskin. Their game plan just gave way to the two-punch KO that we witnessed instead. Yeah. Look, Ohio State, and I was a little bit reluctant myself to say it in the offseason that, Ohio State's soft on defense, that, they're a finesse offense. And remember, for me, I can recall sitting back on New Year's Day last year, the first day of 2022. And probably like you, get a little sentimental on New Year's Day. Sit around and watch football. And I watched the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. And I watched Ohio State take on Utah. It was a great game. And Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, two outstanding wide receivers, they skipped that game and they went pro. So I was watching the wide receivers for Ohio State, what I thought were going to be on the field for Ryan Day and company the following year, this year. And I watched Marvin Harrison Jr. score 3 touchdowns in that game. And I saw Jackson Smith, the Jigba, in that game. And it was amazing. Those guys were amazing. You take out Smith and the Jigba, and he's not in there. That's one of the great players in college football. A lot of that is when I was looking at. I was trying that, and I like Michigan fans. They're my favorite. But Michigan fans that are telling me that Ohio State's soft and they don't deserve to be, I remember before the season started, I had Michigan number 4 in the preseason, but I had Alabama 1 and Ohio State 2, and I said that there was a separation there. Then it was Georgia and Michigan. And there was a lot of pushback, like, Ohio State, they don't deserve to be in any, like, what do they do? Their defense is soft. And it's just a lot of Michigan fans tell me how soft their defense was. And it's like, you guys are Michigan fans. I'm not sure. I know, like, you try, be honest and everything, but I was thinking, and I don't know if Knowles was going to be the guy necessarily, but, the talent. But the game this year, and going back and watching it, Ohio State's defense, it is soft. They don't stick their nose in there. They don't play with, and I don't know, I'm no technician or anything, but I can see when a guy is, kind of standing straight up and just kind of, going after a play and then look like I've watched enough football where I can see that. And I saw that against Michigan. I saw a safety when J.J. McCarthy was going in for that touchdown run that he had. Instead of like lowering his shoulder and knocking him down, like right at the goal line, he could have just stood there. Like if that would have been a Michigan player, I would have said, these guys are soft. These guys don't want it. And I don't know if I don't think that you can just be like, now we need to play with grit. We need to be tough. They were supposed to, you can do that in an entire off season when that's your mantra and you're taking an anvil and every day you're telling toughness, 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 again. But when you see it out there on the field and guys are just sashaying around and you're not seeing a whole lot of toughness, you can't just get into the college football playoff and then start talking about, hey, we need to be tough. So, yeah. Mark asking a question of how many interceptions does Will Johnson get in this game, over and under 2? Well, I would put the over and under at a half. But so if you're putting the over under at 2, I would go under. 1 is excellent. You're talking about over 2. First of all, they get a throw at him, and when you're really like, it's like the kid from Detroit that went to Cincinnati when the Lions were playing him, Sauce Gardner. Somebody was asking me, my friend, like, how many do you think pick Sauce has? And I'm like, I don't know. They don't throw at Sauce very much. And in the game, they targeted Sauce 0 times. So when it comes to Will Johnson, what TCU might do is they might stay away from him. I hope they do throw at Will Johnson, because what we have seen, and this is so much a mark of a future star, and he's a star right now, where you get freshmen that get acclimated, and they'll make big plays in the non-conference against easier opponents and then easier opponents in the Big Ten. But Will Johnson played his best football in the biggest games. And he is, when they say an ascending player, it reminds me of Charles Woodson. You know, Woodson wasn't the first freshman to start. In 95, that was David Bowens. Woodson wasn't the talk of the first couple games about the Michigan freshman being out there. It was David Bowens. Woodson, by the end of the season against Ohio State, intercepted 2 passes against the Buckeyes in his first ever game. Will Johnson, it feels like that. It feels like he is the next Charles Woodson type player, impact player. So it should give you a lot of confidence. Like, you know, I was talking about the jump balls and all of that. And we saw it against Michigan State with Coleman. Having Will Johnson out there, you know, you should feel confident as a Michigan fan. Like, okay, you know, go ahead, throw his way. Let's see. And, you know, they might throw his way and the guys might catch a couple. But I also think that he could get in there and make some plays. I think that's how good he is. All right. OSU secondary was so bad. Martinez is from Michigan, as recruited by Michigan. Yeah. The defense over there for TCU, not or OSU in this case, account 22 saying number 73 in total defense. Yeah, statistically, when you look at TCU, offensively, pretty good. Number 6 and number 7 in the country, both Michigan and TCU averaging over 40 points a game. It's on the defensive side where you look at the scoring defense. Account 22 is talking about total defense. Those are yards and everything. Those are good indicators. I like the scoring defense. Michigan was number 5 in the country. TCU tied for 57th. Advantage, Michigan. 5 more texts. Andres. Let's see how much that plan works for Duggan against Morris, McGregor, Mozzie, etc. I'll say it again. He's going to look like a grandpa by the second quarter. Hit him. Knock him down. I like what you're saying. Otis, the great thing about Michigan now is they can simulate a Duggan run with McCarthy in practice. Heck, I think that they'll be able to have Alex Orgy do a nice simulation of Duggan in practice. Couple more. Antoine is with me on Will Johnson. Yeah, that was great. Jason liked the thoughts of J.J. McCarthy. Richard liked that Wolverine hair. There you go. That's what I was hoping for. Let's see. We got 2 more. Michigan has better pass rush discipline than they had last year. They're really trying to seal the escape lanes. I'm with you on that, Brian. They've got, they can stay fresh. And with the exception of Clifford, who busted out that big one, they've done a good job. Stacks has a prediction. There's a couple predictions coming in. 45-27. I'm thinking around. That's not a bad one. Here's a 52 burger. 17. None of those things don't sound out of the realm of possibility at all. Ooh, OJ's got a closer. 89. Will the TCU run their 3-3-3? 3-33. 3-3-5, I think. Thanks, Antoine. First thing he does. There. Give you the thumbs up. Yeah, they run the 3-3-5. I think they will continue to run the 3-3-5. I think all that's going to happen. And our last one is from, 89, Dr. Funk. After watching the OSU game, they can't be that stubborn to stay and cover 0. Well, they want to stop the run. Ohio State does. Ohio State's not going to beat Georgia. Just, I went through all of the what's are you going to root for OSU and all that. That's fine. Georgia's going to beat Ohio State, and Michigan's going to beat TCU. And it's going to be on. It's going to be a rematch of last year's semifinal, Michigan and Georgia. The question is, will Michigan use that experience of last year and having a better defense this year and having a better quarterback this year, and Georgia being a different team, not having anywhere close to the talent they had on defense and relying on their offense this year, is that going to tip the scales? Is it going to close it up? I think if it's 8.5, sounds like too big of a number to me. So I think that's going to be the conversation when we get to Monday. And that is the conversation that I want to have with you. Tomorrow, the conversation I want to have with you is about the game against the Horned Frogs. And I will give you a reason, or 18, why Michigan may win by a bigger margin on Saturday than you think. It's coming up tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Until then, thanks for watching. We will see you at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Everybody have a great day. Bye.